One night, one drink, one dangerous man who tried to change it all. The rain hammered against the windows of Murphy's bar like angry fists, each drop echoing the chaos in Sarah Chen's chest. She stared at her phone screen, the eviction notice email blurring through her tears. 30 days. That's all she had left before she and her 8-year-old daughter Emma would be homeless. Another whiskey. "Honey," called out Murphy, the grizzled bartender who'd been serving drinks in this Chicago neighborhood for longer than Sarah had been alive. "Just water, thanks," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm outside. She couldn't afford another drink, couldn't afford much of anything anymore. The medical bills from Emma's emergency appendectomy 6 months ago had drained every penny of their savings, and her part-time job at the community center barely covered groceries. The bar door swung open with a violent crash, and a man stumbled in from the storm soaked to the bone. His expensive suit was ruined, his usually perfect hair plastered to his forehead. Sarah glanced up briefly, then back at her phone, too consumed by her own problems to care about some businessman's bad night. "Rough evening?" Murphy asked the stranger, already reaching for a towel. "You could say that." The man's voice carried a weight that made Sarah look up again. He wasn't what she'd expected. Despite the designer clothes, there was something broken in his dark eyes, something that reminded her of her own reflection lately. He ordered a scotch, neat, and sat 2 stools down from her. For several minutes, the only sounds were the rain, the clink of ice, and Sarah's quiet sniffles as she tried to figure out how to tell Emma they might have to move in with her judgmental sister in Milwaukee. "Bad day?" the stranger asked suddenly. Sarah laughed, but it came out bitter. "Bad year, actually. Bad life, if I'm being honest." "I'm Marcus," he said, extending a hand that she noticed was trembling slightly. "Sarah." She shook it, surprised by the calluses on his palms. Not what she'd expect from someone wearing a watch that probably cost more than her annual salary. "What's got you hiding in Murphy's on a Tuesday night?" Marcus asked, his tone gentle but curious. Something about his genuine interest broke down her walls. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the desperation, but she found herself telling this complete stranger everything. About Emma's surgery, the mounting debt, losing their apartment, her ex-husband who disappeared the moment things got difficult. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that showed he was really hearing her. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I have a proposition," he said finally. "And before you think I'm some creep trying to proposition you, hear me out." Sarah tensed, but something in his eyes made her stay. "I need someone real, someone genuine. I'm tired of being surrounded by people who only care about what I can do for them." He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I'll pay off your debts, cover your rent for a year, and give you a job that pays enough to keep you and Emma comfortable. All you have to do is pretend to be my girlfriend for 6 months. Sarah's mouth fell open. "Are you insane? I don't even know you." "Marcus Rothwell," he said simply, "and you're right to be suspicious. But I'm desperate too, Sarah. My father is threatening to take away everything I've worked for unless I settle down and show some responsibility. He thinks I'm just a playboy wasting the family fortune." The name hit her like a physical blow. Marcus Rothwell. She'd seen him in the business section of the Tribune, usually photographed at charity galas, with some socialite on his arm. He was worth more money than she could comprehend. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Crazy enough that it might work. Look, I know how this sounds, but I've been watching you tonight, and you're exactly what I need. You're real. You don't care about my money. Hell, you didn't even recognize me." Sarah's mind raced. It was insane, absolutely insane. But Emma's face flashed in her thoughts, along with the eviction notice, the medical bills, the constant fear that kept her awake at night. What would this actually involve? She heard herself asking. "A few public appearances, some family dinners. You'd have your own room in my penthouse, of course, Emma too. She'd go to one of the best private schools in the city. And after 6 months, you walk away with enough money to start fresh wherever you want. I get my inheritance secured, and we both get what we need." Sarah stared into her water glass, watching the ice cubes melt. This is like something out of a movie. The best ones usually are. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself standing in the marble foyer of Marcus's penthouse, Emma clutching her hand and staring wide-eyed at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. "Mom, is this really going to be our home?" Emma whispered. "Temporarily, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about?" Marcus appeared from the kitchen, having traded his business suit for jeans and a simple t-shirt. He looked younger, more approachable. "Hey there, Emma, I'm Marcus. Your mum told me you like art." Emma nodded shyly. "Want to see something cool?" He led them to a room she hadn't noticed during her initial tour, a fully equipped art studio with easels, paints, and natural light streaming in from huge windows. "This is all mine?" Emma's eyes went wide. "For as long as you're here," Marcus said, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest at the genuine smile on his face. The first month was awkward, like living with a polite stranger. Marcus left early for work and came home late, usually finding Sarah and Emma already asleep. But gradually things began to change. She started leaving dinner in the fridge for him. He began coming home earlier, often finding Emma working on art projects at the kitchen island while Sarah cooked. Soon, he was joining them for meals, asking Emma about her new school, listening to her excited chatter about her art teacher. "She's incredible," Marcus told Sarah one evening as they cleaned up after dinner, while Emma watched a movie in the living room. "You've raised an amazing kid." "It hasn't been easy doing it alone," Sarah admitted. "You shouldn't have had to." Their first public appearance was at a charity gala for children's hospitals. Sarah felt like an imposter in the designer dress Marcus had insisted on buying her, surrounded by Chicago's elite who looked at her with barely concealed curiosity. "Just stay close to me," Marcus murmured, his hand steady on her lower back as they navigated the crowd. But when they were introduced to Dr. Patricia Hamilton, the head of pediatric surgery at Northwestern, Sarah forgot about being nervous. "You're the woman who advocated so fiercely for the hospital's sliding-scale payment program," Dr. Hamilton said. "I remember your letters, your calls. You helped save that program when the board wanted to cut it." Sarah flushed, aware that several people were listening. "My daughter needed surgery, and I saw how many families were struggling. It wasn't right." Later, as they danced to the orchestra's soft melodies, Marcus pulled her closer. "You didn't tell me you were an activist. I'm not. I couldn't stand by and watch kids suffer because their parents couldn't afford help." Something in his expression made her heart flutter, a look of admiration mixed with something deeper. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm starting to understand why my father wants me to find someone real." The turning point came in month 4. Sarah was making coffee when she overheard Marcus on a heated phone call in his office. "No, Dad, I won't fire the entire maintenance staff just to boost quarterly profits. Because they have families, they depend on these jobs. I don't care what the board thinks." She lingered outside his door, hearing a side of him she'd never seen. "That's exactly the problem, Marcus." His father's voice carried through the speakerphone. "You're too soft, too emotional. A real CEO makes hard decisions. Maybe I don't want to be the kind of CEO you are." That evening, Marcus seemed distracted during dinner. After Emma went to bed, Sarah found him on the balcony staring out at the lake. "Rough day?" she asked, echoing his question from that first night at Murphy's. He laughed, but it sounded tired. "My father wants me to lay off 300 people before the end of the quarter. Says it'll look good to investors." "What do you want to do?" "Find another way. There's always another way, but it requires thinking beyond the next fiscal quarter." Sarah stepped closer. "Then find it. It's not that simple. If I don't meet his expectations, he'll remove me from the company entirely. Put someone else in charge who will make those cuts without a second thought. So you're stuck choosing between your conscience and your position?" "Story of my life," he said bitterly. Without thinking, Sarah reached for his hand. "For what it's worth, I think those 300 families are lucky to have someone fighting for them." Marcus turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." "Mommy?" Emma's voice interrupted from behind them. "I can't sleep." The moment shattered, but something had shifted between them, something real and fragile and entirely outside the parameters of their agreement. Everything fell apart on a rainy Thursday in month 5. Sarah was picking Emma up from school when she overheard two mothers talking. "Did you see the Tribune article? Apparently Marcus Rothwell's whole relationship is fake, some kind of business arrangement." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" One of the women, Victoria Ashford, who Sarah recognized from several charity events, turned with a smug smile. "Oh, you haven't seen it. Someone leaked the story. Your little arrangement is front-page news." Sarah's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. There it was, in black and white. Billionaire's fake romance, the elaborate scheme to fool his father. The article contained details that only someone close to Marcus could have known. Her eviction notice, Emma's medical bills, even quotes from their supposedly private conversations. Emma tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing, baby. Let's go home." But when they arrived at the penthouse, Marcus was waiting with 2 suitcases and an envelope. "Sarah, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been documenting our private life for your entertainment. That this was all some sick game." "It wasn't like that. Someone betrayed us, leaked information they shouldn't have had. I think it was someone from my father's camp trying to sabotage." "I don't want to hear it." Sarah's voice was deadly calm. "Emma, go pack your things." "Sarah, please, don't let them win. Don't let them destroy what we've built." "Built? We built nothing. This was all fake, remember? Just a business arrangement." She picked up the envelope he'd set on the counter, undoubtedly her payment for services rendered. "Consider our contract fulfilled." "Mommy, why are we leaving?" Emma's voice was small, confused. "I like it here. I like Marcus." Sarah's heart shattered at the tears in her daughter's eyes, but she couldn't stay, not when everything had been a lie. They ended up in a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, funded by the money Marcus had promised her. Sarah tried to tell herself it was better this way. They had enough to start over. Emma could stay in her new school, and they were independent again. But Emma kept asking about Marcus, kept wondering why they'd left so suddenly. And Sarah found herself missing things she hadn't expected. The way he'd listened to Emma's stories with complete attention, how he'd started leaving little notes in Sarah's lunch, the way he'd look at her when he thought she wasn't watching. 2 weeks after they'd left, Sarah was walking past a newsstand when a headline caught her eye. "Rothwell Industries announces 0 layoffs. Innovative restructuring plan." The article detailed Marcus's refusal to cut jobs despite board pressure and his alternative plan to expand into renewable energy sectors. The accompanying photo showed him looking tired but determined. That evening, Emma was unusually quiet over dinner. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Did Marcus do something bad to us?" Sarah paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Why do you ask?" "Because you seemed happy when we lived with him, and he seemed happy too. But then we left so fast, and you won't talk about him." Out of the mouths of babes. Sarah realized she'd been so focused on the betrayal, on protecting her pride, that she'd missed something important. Emma had been happy. They'd all been happy. The next morning, Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. She called Dr. Hamilton from the Children's Hospital. "Dr. Hamilton, this is Sarah Chen. I wondered if you might help me with something." An hour later, she had her answer. The leak hadn't come from Marcus or anyone in his inner circle. It had come from Victoria Ashford, who'd been eavesdropping at charity events and had connections at the Tribune. Apparently, Victoria had her own designs on Marcus and saw Sarah as an obstacle to remove. Sarah stared at her phone, Dr. Hamilton's words echoing in her head. "Marcus has been calling the hospital every day, asking about funding for your daughter's art therapy program. He's donated enough to run it for 10 years, specifically requested it be anonymous. That boy is head over heels for you, dear." That evening, Sarah found herself standing outside Murphy's bar, Emma's hand in hers. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see Marcus sitting in the same spot where they'd met, nursing the same drink, looking as lost as he had that first night. "Is that him, Mom?" Emma whispered. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "He looks sad." "Yeah, baby, he does." "Maybe we should go in." Sarah took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The familiar smell of old wood and spilled beer greeted them, along with Murphy's surprised smile. "Well, I'll be damned," the old bartender said. "Look what the storm brought in." Marcus looked up, and the hope that flashed across his face was almost too much to bear. Sarah, Emma. He stood so quickly he knocked over his stool. "What are you doing here?" "I figured out who leaked our story," Sarah said simply, "and I realized I made a mistake." "You did?" Emma let go of Sarah's hand and ran to Marcus, throwing her arms around his waist. "I missed you," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. Marcus looked over Emma's head at Sarah, his eyes questioning. "The contract was fake," Sarah said, stepping closer. "But somewhere along the way, this became real. At least it did for me." "Sarah," Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could lose her nerve. "I love how you listen to Emma like she's the most important person in the world. I love how you agonize over decisions that affect people you've never met. I love that you eat my terrible cooking without complaining and leave notes in my lunch like we're teenagers." "Your cooking isn't terrible," Marcus said, and she laughed despite her tears. "The point is, I fell in love with you. The real you. Not the billionaire, not the fake boyfriend, but the man who comes home tired from fighting for other people's jobs." Marcus reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I fell in love with you the night we met, when you cried over eviction notices and fought for your daughter. I fell in love with your strength, your kindness, your terrible jokes at breakfast." "Hey," Sarah protested, but she was smiling. "And I fell in love with Emma's laugh and her terrible finger paintings that I have framed in my office." "They're not terrible," Emma giggled, still wrapped around his waist. "You're right. They're masterpieces." Murphy cleared his throat. "Not to interrupt this touching reunion, but are you folks going to order something? This is still a business?" "You know." Marcus laughed, pulling Sarah closer. "3 hot chocolates, Murphy. We're celebrating." "What are we celebrating?" Emma asked. Sarah looked up at Marcus, seeing their future reflected in his eyes. Not the fake contractual future they'd planned, but something real and wonderful and entirely their own. "We're celebrating coming home," Sarah said. Outside, the storm was finally breaking, giving way to the first clear sky they'd seen in weeks.